Welcome to the Driving Change podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network, where we live at the intersection of neuroscience and storytelling. If you love great stories and you love understanding the mindset it takes to be a world-class change agent, then join us as our fascinating guests from all walks of life unpack their unique journeys of perseverance and passion, of expertise and experience, and be inspired to use your own story to drive change. Welcome back to Driving Change, where we explore the stories behind the leaders who aren't just building businesses, they're building better ways of thinking, leading, and living. Real transformation doesn't come from titles or transactions, as you all know that listen to the show. It comes from people who wake up every day with a purpose bigger than themselves. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to give a shout out to our season sponsor, Brain Trust. Go to braintrustgrowth.com and learn more about how leaders can coach more effectively, sellers can communicate with customers more effectively, and drive meaningful growth using the science of human behavior. That's braintrustgrowth.com. So today's guest, I'm excited to have on the show, Tony Shipley. And Tony, he believes that true legacy of a leader isn't what they accumulate, it's what they can activate in others. Now, this belief that Tony has, and whether you've been an entrepreneur or business leader or not, you're going to take a lot of things away from today's episode. I can already tell just in the pre-show. So Tony was one of the CEOs and founders of one of the fastest growing tech companies in America. And now he's mentoring a next generation of founders through one of the Midwest's most active angel investing groups. See, Tony founded Intech Scientific way back in the early 80s and turned it into a top tier player in the industrial software space, earning a spot at number 414 on the Inc. 500 before its acquisition by Rockwell Automation. But it's what he did after that exit that will really tell you who he is and what he's all about. He founded Queen City Angels, and now he's helped funnel over $120 million into over 125 startups with a total investment now of over $1 billion into these groups. And this has quietly become one of the most influential voices in early stage investing, Tony, as well as Queen City Angels, not just in Cincinnati, but across the country. Now, today's episode, we're going to dive into more topics than just how to be a great entrepreneur. We're going to say, how does Tony's life lessons translate into all areas of your life, and think about it from that perspective as we go. So Tony, it's an honor to not only have you on the show, but to have you here in studio in lovely Cincinnati and Mason, Ohio. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. Great to be with you.
So, I warned you ahead of time that we always start with the guest gets the first single question is always your origin story. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, who your early influencers were, and how that path led you down the path that you ended up where you are today.
Well, before the show, we had a great opportunity to share notes about our background, and I found it interesting that you're an old farm boy just like I am. So I got my early childhood was spent in East Tennessee on a tobacco farm. And some of the takeaways there are that you have to work hard in that kind of an environment, just basically to live. But the other thing that was a takeaway from me was I decided that in an early stage, I didn't want to do that for a lifetime career. And I was bound to get an education to allow me to pursue something else in my life. And it turns out math and science were my best subjects in high school. And I decided to become an engineer, so I attended the University of Tennessee and got an engineering degree. And from there, joined a Fortune 500 company that had 40,000 people in it. Most days I felt like I was probably number 39,998. But that was also an interesting experience because I got an opportunity to learn about the business of a business, what makes a business tick on somebody else's nickel. So I went through a training program, and it was really helped set the stage for what I did later on in life. And as life would have it, I met a person there that was a University of Cincinnati graduate that turned out to be a roommate for a short period when we first went to Pensacola. And he ended up getting called from a small startup in Cincinnati a couple of years after we started with this big company. And he elected to join, so moving from a 40,000 person company, I think the time he joined was probably 20 or 25 people. And he called me 6 months later and said, "Hey, we have another job opening. Would you like to come up and interview?" So I interviewed, and I thought this could be a really exciting environment to move from that large corporate environment, which a lot of procedures and processes were in place to do anything, to a small company where there was no bench strength and everybody relied on you to come to work every day and do the things that you had to do to help that company be successful. And so when I became a small company person, that was really the environment that I wanted to spend the rest of my career in. And having that engineering background, I felt like I lacked the business skills to eventually run a business. And so I, in the evenings and the weekend, did an MBA. It took about a 3-year process. And then at the end of that, a couple of guys were leaving that small company and starting their own business. They were technologists, and they needed somebody that had that business skills and sales and marketing skills to come along with them and help start this new business. So that service businesses led to a software business, an engineering product business. So the last business, I had left the 2 guys that I had initially joined or started with, and we had a new partner to take the new software business forward. You mentioned the company, Intech Scientific. We started with 2 people, and by the time we were done, it was one of those overnight successes that just took us 18 years to get there. But we were a 400-person company that serviced customers in about 100 different countries around the globe. So it was really, really an exciting opportunity. You asked me about some of the early influences. I think living on a farm and having I knew grandparents on both sides of my family. I had a working mom, even though we had a dysfunctional family at some level. That was brought great values to the table and taught me that hard working was really about everything. You had to really work hard. And then along the way, I had professors that paid particular attention to who I was and what I was trying to do and provided that guidance when I needed it. I think in a big picture sense, I think God always provided that important person in my life when he felt that I needed somebody there to help coach me through what I was facing. And it even carried through to the woman that I eventually married. When I worked for that big company, I learned how to play golf. And one Sunday morning, I'm playing golf, and these 2 people show up, an elderly man and woman. They said, "Can we join you?" And I had my buddy, and we said, "Oh, okay." Well, about halfway around, she had told me all about her daughter and said we should get together and play golf. And we did, and we met. 3 months later, we were engaged, and 3 months later, we were married, and 54, 55 years later, we're still going strong. But again, I think it's that God playing an active role in my life and bringing the right person to the table when I needed somebody to help me through whatever it was I was trying to do.
Well, thank goodness you had a tea time that day, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So one of the things I always find fascinating is, and maybe I oversimplify things, but it's one of my favorite Einstein quotes, right? If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. When I think about, you growing up on the farm, and I think about systems thinking, and I tell people one day, books, probably my last memoir will be everything I need to know in life I learned on the farm. I think about in a systems thinking way, don't businesses generally operate very similarly as say a farm? A farm is a business, and there's a system that must happen. And that system has people responsible for different elements of how that farm operates in order at the end of the season to make a net profit off of the yield. And isn't that how every business operates? Do we overcomplicate? Like, where's the complexity in a business compared to the simplicity that it needs to be to really keep people bought into a vision? If you're a startup or an entrepreneur and you have an idea, does this question make sense? I'm trying to I oversimplify things for people out there, but I think sometimes when I hear people talk about their business, it's way too complex in the way they describe it.
Well, I think a couple of lessons to take away from the farm business was you had to solve the problems that popped up. So you had to be a kind of a jack of all trades to do the things that had to be done. You didn't have the money to go hire somebody to fix this piece of equipment or do whatever. So you had to learn a lot about what you were doing to make the farm successful. And then, as you know, anytime you're farming, there's a season to every part of the process that you're using. So it has to be done in a timely manner. So you've got to keep things in a stack so that it all plays out the way it's supposed to at the end of the day. So I think that, Jeff, I think that makes a lot of sense to think of it from that type of a simplistic approach. I think a lot of people get hung up in their business because they try to make it too complex, and as opposed to getting it down to basics. What are the customer wants and needs? And are we developing something that meets a true market demand? And when we sell that product or service, is there enough value add in terms of the value proposition that we're providing that customers will come back on a repetitive basis and continue to buy from us?
I think that's such a great, and I know people are probably that hear me speak all the time, and even the folks around the business here that get tired of my farm analogies. But if you're an entrepreneur and you're listening today, or you're thinking about starting a business, it really is the skills required for an entrepreneur is that you have to be the jack of all trades when you start a company. Just like on a farm, you can't anticipate your tractor, blowing a transmission in the middle of planting season. But you darn well better be able to replace that transmission in a timely manner to get that tractor back in the field, or at the end of the day, you're going to be hurting. And as a business owner that launches an idea, having the ability to map out the perfect state of here's how a bill becomes a law, here's how the business operates, and then having the skill to be nimble enough to solve any problem that might pop up at any time, or know where to go get help solving that problem. I think about the parallels there. They're so rich for me, from an entrepreneur and somebody running a farm. And now you can use a lot of other analogies on the farm, but you and I have that in common, so it's an easy one to think about.
Exactly.
So where do entrepreneurs today, do you see, because man, things have changed so much, even since I started my company 13, 14 years ago. Where do entrepreneurs today, where are they getting hung up in that early, maybe let's pause. So maybe define what you would call the stages of an entrepreneur, from somebody has an idea in the shower to somebody actually got somebody to pay for something. Like exactly. What do those stages look like for you?
Yeah, well, so that whole creative stage of where they're thinking about what that product or service is going to look like, something has influenced them in their life, whether it's a current job or previous job, something, their education, something has prompted the idea that if we do A, B will happen. And a lot of entrepreneurs get caught up just on the mousetrap, whatever the idea is. And they think if I create the best mousetrap in the world, people will beat a path to my door and buy the mousetrap. And they forget about looking at the customer wants and needs, and how is their idea going to influence what that customer is going to do with the product. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs they don't think enough about the value that they're delivering to the customer. They think, oh, if I just have this new algorithm or this new SaaS model or whatever it is, people will see the inherent value in that and buy it. And as you and I know, in the world of selling, that's not the way it works. We have to understand what's impacting a person's business, what they wanted, what's problems that are causing them not to be as efficient or cost effective or whatever it is that they're lacking. And they're looking for solutions that can help them overcome those problems. And as salespeople, our goal is to understand what those issues are, and then on a consultative selling approach, come back with a solution that meets the wants and needs, and then be able to demonstrate to them that it is in fact a cost-effective solution. They can buy from us, but because of what they're paying, they're still going to get a return on investment because of the way our solution helps and impacts their business. But I think in terms of those stages of an entrepreneur, it's that basic idea, and then some way quickly transitioning to a minimally viable product that you can take to the marketplace in some limited capacity, so that you can start to talk to prospective customers about what your idea is, and be open-minded, because it's never the initial product out of the box. You're always refining that product to make it better. And if you listen to customers, they'll give you a ton of ideas in terms of how to refine it and make it better. And they don't charge you anything to do that, because They want you to be successful because if you have something that's successful, a successful product, that can help them be successful in their business. So be open-minded to what they're giving to you. Use that to iterate the product, and then go through some type, and I call that the alpha stage of a product development, where you're getting some limited customer feedback and a lot of internal feedback. And then when you've got it refined to another level, take it out and do what I call a beta test, a limited marketing introduction of the product, and see how the market responds to it. And then once you think you have fine-tuned that design to a point that you can scale the product or the service, that's when I would look at building a team around scaling the whole business, and how do I roll out that out in a way that I made it a meaningful business at that point. And then that's going to require a whole bunch of changes in terms of how you thought about the business from that initial conceptual stage where you're the founder in a shower and thinking about it, to that stage of where you're actually onboarding lots of customers and you've got reoccurring revenue from those customers. So a lot of things happen in that whole process.
Yeah, the big thing there that you said that struck a chord with me is, we're all probably guilty of this to some degree, but really where you fail quickly is, I have an idea that I'm good at something, so I'm going to build something around what I'm good at, and then I'm going to go try to convince the market that they should buy it. Versus, what does the market need? What are customers actually struggling with? Now, can I align what my gifts and talents are to create something that solves that problem, and then go to them and ask them if it solves the problem and to test it. And we get into the perfect world, which is some customer funded development as you go. And that, I think that tension exists in every entrepreneur's mind behind their ideas and what they think and what they are good at and what they want to create versus what the market might actually pay for, based on what their perception of the value of the problem it solves.
I agree. And another thing you said there, Jeff, was failing quick. That's another important concept that as a founder I would focus on. I want to know what the issues are in the product as quick as I can, because that's both a time issue and a cost issue. And you're spending money either out of your bank account, or if you've been successful in getting outside money, you're spending somebody else's money to make that happen. So failing quick and getting to the right iteration. And remember Edison, I think he had 32 iterations of the light bulb before he finally got it. But he learned how to fail quickly and get to the next iteration to get him to the final solution. So I think that's really important. One other thing, Jeff, that I'll mention, when you and I started years ago, you basically had to invent the processes of entrepreneurship as you went. There were a few books that you could read, a few people that you could go talk to, but the world, as you pointed out, has changed dramatically today. So there's a bunch of resources that any up-and-coming founder that wants to start a business, they can get access to those resources, unlike any period of time that we've had in the history of our country. So one of the things I encourage entrepreneurs to do is this whole notion of networking, getting out in the marketplace, even with that initial prototype or early stage minimally viable product that they have, getting out and talking to people about that, to how to make it better. But people will talk to you about anything. And there's enough folks today that have been successful in their careers that they're willing to pay it forward and help up and comers, that if you just simply go ask the question, can I talk to you about A, B, or C? You'll get a lot of folks that are willing to help you. And then the services organizations that have popped up today are really quite phenomenal. So there's really no excuse for an entrepreneur today not to be well equipped to do the things that need to be done. And even though you can't hire full-time people, like on the farm, you couldn't hire a full-time mechanic, right, you had to become one. Well, you don't necessarily have to become a mechanic today. You can hire a fractional mechanic. And a better analogy might be, you don't need to be an expert in financial matters. You can, or a CPA, you can hire a fractional CPA to come in and work with you. But I think that's important, because I encourage founders to think about how to spend the most time on refining the product, understanding the market wants and needs, and making sure that you're building something that satisfies those wants and needs.
What advice would you give to entrepreneurs or founders And I remember struggling with this to some degree, and I think we always still do to some degree or another, is when you don't know what you don't know, so you don't know what to even ask. So what about those founders who are like, look, I would love to network with people more, but I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to be asking. And so therefore, I wouldn't even know who to go to ask it. So if you think about that, I see a lot of founders sometimes, so then they'll get tunnel vision and they'll say, well, so therefore I'll just keep plowing ahead with what I think I should do. Because I've learned this the hard way over 14 years. There's so many elements to a successful business that's growing. You know the categories, but you don't know exactly what you don't know. You don't know what to ask. So what would you advise around that category?
Yeah. So one of my goals as a manager, as I transitioned from a founder to a manager, was to become a competent incompetent. So what do I mean by that? I wanted to be smart enough to ask the right questions to get to the answers that we needed. And I wanted to be smart enough to hire the right people on our team that wanted to go off and develop the answers to the questions that we had. I think sometimes entrepreneurs, early stage folks, they're shy and they'll use that as an excuse. Candidly speaking, what I would recommend to folks is work on a 5-minute elevator pitch of what it is you're trying to do, why you think it's important. And when you get an opportunity to talk to someone, first and foremost, what's the first thing you're trying to sell when you talk to somebody new?
Yourself.
So one of the things I like to ask founders is, what do you think about salespeople? And so many founders they'll turn their thumb down, like, no, we don't want to be like salespeople. And then the obvious question is, how many people in the world are selling something? And the obvious answer is everybody. And it starts with, what are you selling first and foremost? It's selling you.
Right.
So I encourage founders to think about selling a better version of them and being able to talk to people. And you don't have to have all the questions. You just have to have one or two. Like in this session, you said, I'm going to give you one question, and then we're going to see where this goes. I encourage founders to think the same way, because having that little elevator pitch about who they are and that elevator pitch about what their idea is, and lay it out. What do you think about this? Do you think this will work? And there's so many just open-ended questions that you can ask that gets that conversation going. And before you know it, you'll be 2 hours into a conversation where people get intrigued by who you are and what it is that you're trying to do, that you start to bring people along with you to help you develop whatever it is that you're trying to develop.
Yeah, that's great. I was thinking too around my own journey, like where did I get tripped up and what slowed me down or slogged me up a little bit. And it's the two things that come to mind are it was either fear related or pride related. I was either afraid to ask, to reach out, to do something that showed that I needed help, fear of whatever that might have been the case, or it was pride that I didn't want someone to think I didn't know the answer. And I think about both of those being two sides of the same failure coin for an entrepreneur. So when you hear me say that, does that resonate at all with some of the?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think back in my early days when I was running the last company, a software company, and in those early days, I felt like I needed to know the answer to every question. But at some point, the light bulb came on, and I thought, nobody in their right mind expects everybody to have the answer to every question.
Right.
In fact, that's a boring situation. What they want is a dialogue where you're asking questions and you're interacting with each other. And when that light bulb came on, life got so much better for me as a manager, because I could go back and somebody asked a question. Well, I don't know. That's something pretty interesting. Why don't you go research it and come back and share with me what you found about that issue, and let's discuss it. Help educate me on the issue too. And that kind of a simple dialogue got people to do, basically to a point they would run through brick walls to solve a problem for you, because they felt like they were empowered to do the things that you couldn't do as a manager. And that ended up being a winning combination. So I think most early stage managers, Jeff, have that same kind of fear. and they don't want to admit they don't know something, but the day the light bulb comes on and they come to grips with that and actually do it, they find out life gets much simpler.
You know what's funny about that? Because I think this applies to whether you're a manager inside a business or a company, or whether you're a startup entrepreneur. When I think back to some of my best leaders that I worked for, they probably knew the answer. They probably knew it, but they didn't act like they knew it because they wanted me to go do the work to learn. I think they could have given me the answer. And I tell you, I struggle with that probably still the most, because I am in the mindset that we're all in this hamster wheel going and going, or the treadmill at 11 when it only goes to 10. And in your mind, you think, well, it'd be much faster if I just tell them the answer so we can all get about our day. And yet what happens then is nobody learns. Nobody, their ideas get thwarted. They don't get to go out, because no matter if I have the answer or not, if another person went out to do the work to go come up with their own answer, there's probably 3 things they picked up that I would have never thought of that make the answer better, right?
Exactly.
I think I still struggle with that at times, and the root of it is I'm thinking we're being faster and more efficient. Do you see that a lot with early stage entrepreneurs?
I do, but so in early stage investing, you have some rules under which you make investments. And so one of the things that we look at is a founder or a management team that's coachable.
Yeah.
So if a founder or a management team comes in and presents to us and they've got the solution to every question.
It's yeah, but, right? The answer is always yeah, but here's why we do it that way.
And they come across as they already know everything about everything. We take a pass on that business. We do not invest in that business because we don't have a founder or a management team that's open to input and then scraping off the best parts of that input to make their idea and their company better. So what we've discovered, and what I discovered early on as a manager, was the more open I was to people's idea, the less rote their job became, the more interesting it became, and the better team members that we had taking the company forward. And we see the same thing in all of these little companies that we support. And we take board seats, and we're not there to micromanage the company. That's not our goal. We don't take a majority ownership in these companies. We are a minority holder. But we want to have good governance, and we want to have some input strategically about where that business is going. We don't want to direct the business, but we want to give input, and then we want the founder and the management team to think about scraping off the best parts of that to take that company forward. And in my opinion, those are the winning teams that get to a point that they scale and develop really successful businesses.
I think that's huge. And if you're listening out there today and you're a founder or startup, it doesn't matter whether you got 2 people with you or you're up to 200. I think that's the limiting factor, is that having having the strength and fortitude to be intellectually curious at all stages around all people is, man, it is such an important skill. And this doesn't matter whether you're a founder, entrepreneur, or whether you're helping with your kids' little league team, right? Is adopting that spirit as a human to being intellectually curious and open, even if the idea the person might provide for you may not be that helpful. But so if 8 of the 10 ideas aren't helpful, but 2 of them are genius, and you would have never come up with those 2 on your own, how much further are you, right?
Well, Jeff, you're hitting on half of what I think is really critical in anything I've ever done in my life. So having that level of intellectual curiosity. And I couldn't articulate that when I was younger. I was doing it in a lot of ways. As an engineer, you're taught to think in a logical, rational way. And so I was doing a lot of that, being intellectually curious about how do I solve this equation? And then the other part of that is critical thinking. And so when I think back about my education, those early companies that I worked for, it was intellectual curiosity and critical thinking that led to the best solutions. Mm. And so I encourage everybody to think, what are the key takeaways from whatever the things are that you've done in life? Think of it in those 2 ways, and then how am I going to reapply that into my new situation to make it even better? So intellectual curiosity, which you talked about, which I think is really key, and then critical thinking on top of that.
Yeah, and I think what you probably see this. I mean, you've evaluated. I don't even know how many businesses have you
Hundreds
evaluated.
and hundreds.
Probably into the thousands or close to it at
Maybe,
this
yeah.
point, right? And so you said number one, you look for owners, founders, leadership teams that are coachable, that are moldable, that are willing to listen. I think that's huge. And number two, this idea of intellectual curiosity with critical thinking. I mean, the brain is built as this predictive machine, right? But it functions out of its programming. So trying to uncover, and I tell this to everyone, even our clients today, but even especially founders, like identifying what is your predictive programming, because it's unconscious. So you operate out of your unconscious. 95% of your communication comes from your unconscious. 95% of your thinking comes from your unconscious. So I'm curious for you on founders. Can you see the patterns emerging quickly as you start to evaluate founders on, maybe you didn't put it in a category and label it as kind of predictive programming, but you can see that the way they show up, there's something there that's either very positive because you can tell their unconscious programming and just the way they operate is right in line with what you think makes a great founder successful, or is it they got some programming in there that looks like it's going to probably cause us all a lot of pain if we invest here?
Well, so what's that programming a function of? It's a function of your past experience and skills and education and so forth and so on. So we try to understand the makeup and the background of the people that we are vetting for a potential investment. But the really good ones, they will come prepared, and they'll take all of that history, all that background. They'll talk to other folks about how do I present this in a way that when I get that opportunity to talk to a group of investors, I'm going to talk to them in investor terminology, ways that they can understand that I've got a great idea. It can change the world in these ways. It could have this kind of an impact on the world. And as we change the world and bring great solutions, here's a way that we're all going to make money out of it. And this is how we have to set it up to operate it as a business. And those founders that they'll tell you, well, we don't have this person on the team yet and that's an open slot, but we're going to use part of your money to bring that kind of a person in to round out the team. But they're thinking logically and rationally how to take the next step. They just haven't put together a group of people and hoped for the best. They've thought about how they're going to take this thing forward. And that's a lot of that, candidly, is experience. And when you look at the industry data on the most successful companies that exit, and that's why we invest, is to exit. We don't invest in lifestyle business for people to hang on to them for 20 or 30 years. That's not part of the plan. But the ones that have the greatest chance of exit have the ones that have been there and done it. So experience does count. Now, of course, all founders or entrepreneurs cannot be multiple entrepreneurs, right? You have to have a bunch of us. I was the first time.
Some point, you got to do it once, right?
Do it once. But the key to that is learning from that whole process and hopefully make that company successful. But if for whatever reason it fails, and the failure rate in early stage businesses is big, it's a big percentage.
Is this still over 80 in the first couple of years? I can't remember. There used to be some data on that. I haven't looked at it in a while.
Jeff, you have to divide it into, in our world, there's two big buckets. There's what we call the lifestyle kind of business, mainly services kinds of businesses, and then what we call the venture backable businesses. And those are mainly technology kinds of businesses. If the technology kind of business gets up and running, the failure rate, I think, is less than over on the lifestyle stage. A lifestyle business, generally speaking, there's limited barriers of entry. There's a very limited moat that you can build around that business idea. People get burned out. They run out of money. There's 1,000 reasons why those businesses don't make it. We don't invest in those kinds of business, but the failure rate wouldn't surprise me. I've seen, like you, Jeff, I've seen rates that are upwards of 80 or 90% of the businesses that don't make it.
For various reasons, but a lot of what you just touched on, right? Yeah.
There's a whole lot of reasons why they don't.
So I'm curious, as we kind of round up around third here and head for home, to use Cincinnati language from Joe Nuxall and Marty Brenneman. If you're not a Reds fan, you don't know who those two people are.
Exactly.
What what's your vision for where you're at? I mean, you're in a legacy stage now where you're really helping with Queen City Angels. You're really helping founders, not just locally and regionally, Midwest. You're looking all over. Like, what do you want your legacy to be?
Well,
And personally and professionally, like pull it all together. Like, what do you want Tony Shipley at the end of the day when someone's standing up and eulogizing you? Like, what do you want that story to be?
I want my family first and foremost to say he was a great guy.
Yeah,
That they love me. That's
important.
to me. That's the most important thing in life.
Yeah, all the rest of it's all for naught if you fail on that one, right?
And it's life is really about making memories. So at the end, whatever else you have, the two things that you have that mean the most are family and your memories. Over on the business side of that, my North Star has been entrepreneurship. So when I think about the things that I've done, I've been a practicing entrepreneur for almost 25 years and started 3 businesses. As you know, the last grew to a 400-person company, it was really exciting. And we could still be running that business today, but we decided to take venture capital money to accelerate the growth of the business. And when you do that, that means there's an automatic exit that's coming with that new money. So it can't be a lifestyle. And we took venture money, so we had to sell it within some period of time as we got to a certain level. But helping entrepreneurs and helping develop our community, I think we've done we've been a catalyst in many regards in terms of building entrepreneurship in our local community. And if you go down and talk to Chuck Matthews at UC, or you talk to anybody that's in this space and ask them about the impact of Queen City Angels on the local entrepreneurship ecosystem, I think they'll tell you in positive terms that it's been very beneficial. And I did the same thing on a national basis. I was on the founding team of the Angel Capital Association going back to 2002, when there were probably only 40 or 50 angel groups in the entire country.
Wow.
And we set up I'm running out of time here, but we set up an organization that was going to help create best practices and help scale this whole notion of angel investing. And I was on the founding team of that, and I eventually became in charge of strategic planning, which led to the vice chair, which led to the chair, and then the past chair. So we've had a big influence on things that are going on nationally from early stage investing. And our group is kind of recognized as a leader in terms of the processes and the procedures and the business methods that we use to do what we do. So the goal is to keep that going and scaling it, but it's really about all the wonderful people that have come to the table to work with us. We've got just phenomenal people that really make it special.
Yeah, I think that's got to feel really good. 125 plus startups that you've invested in and come alongside those founders to help them pursue a dream that started in their shower, right?
Well, and Jeff, you're hitting a key point. It's you're meeting people and you're hearing technology that you never would hear about, because a lot of this stuff never makes it to the marketplace. It simply dies. But that's really been the exciting part of it. And then having people come into the group that are only there for, you have to make money. That's our evergreening feature. But really to give back and to help these people be successful in their business. That's really been the gratifying part of what we do.
Yeah, I can imagine. So where would folks go? What I'm really curious about, as we talked earlier, is how founders need to reach out and network and understand who to ask and what to ask. And you're a wealth of resources. So where can folks that are listening to the show either have an idea, maybe they're early stage founder, maybe they're a mid-stage founder, where can they go? You would say, hey, go here or go there. Here's some books to read. Here's some websites to go check out. Here's a way to get connected to the community that you've helped create. Where can we learn more about that?
Yeah, so Centrifuge downtown is one place to go. And they've got a facility and do all kinds of programming that help early stage. 1819 over at UC is another great place to go. They've got programming that they provide to early stage founders. Alloy, which has been around for 30 or 40 or maybe longer years, but they actually house early stage companies, and we do all kinds of morning mentoring sessions. Every week we do a morning mentoring session. We do entrepreneur boot camps, but at least those 3 locally. And then go online. I mean, you can go to the Queen City Angel site and there's materials that can help people there. But, and all these 3 organizations offer events where you can go participate. So I encourage people to sign up, get off the sofa, go down, meet these people, and start to share your ideas. And don't be reluctant in terms of what you're sharing. A lot of people think, oh, I can't tell Jeff about this idea. He'll steal my idea.
Right.
That may happen once in a blue moon, but most people are focused on their own stuff.
Yes.
And so share enough and be prepared enough that you can talk to these people in a way that sets the hook, because tell me more is really an important comment that you can get back from people. That means you've connected with them.
Right. You created the intellectual curiosity in them.
Exactly.
They want to learn more about your idea. I've often said the same thing too about ideas. If your idea is so fragile that you're afraid to share it because someone's going to steal it, it wasn't that great of an idea.
Amen, brother.
Well, Tony, this has been great. And I think as we develop a relationship together, I'd love to have you back on periodically to talk about what's happening in not just Cincinnati, but in Queen City Angels, and what your work is with the other groups around the country, because we're obviously passionate about helping companies grow, because we're in the process of doing it ourselves. So we'd love to have you back on from time to time, if that would be okay.
Absolutely, Jeff. It's been enjoyable. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the show. And it was an honor to have you.
Thank you.